All right, howdy folks. So today we're going to do installment 2 of genetics. We're going to be talking about different types of crosses. So to review and to compare, let's go back and look at our complete dominance crosses that we practiced last time. So in complete dominance, the dominant trait covers up the recessive alleles, okay? It's like they're not even there. So you have that dominant, recessive, and nothing in between. So in this case, we're going to use big R to represent red and flowers, and lowercase r is the recessive gene, which is white and flowers. So let's go ahead and do an example here. So I'm going to click on here, and what we're going to be doing is we're going to say kind of what color these guys are. So if you had a genotype big R, then in this case, in complete dominance, your flower would be red, okay? If you had big R, that big R is going to completely cover up that recessive trait, and your flower is also going to be red. And then finally, if you had two recessive alleles, capitalized on me, two recessive alleles, then that is going to make your flower white, okay? So this is what we worked on last time, where the heterozygous individual, and this is the one that really makes a difference, the one that is hetero, looks like it has the dominant trait. So we're going to do an example cross, and you're going to put one of these also in your notes. So in my Punnett square over here, let's breed two heterozygous individuals, which in this case, both parents would be red. And so they would have big R alleles and little r alleles. And we're going to do that for both parents. Make them big R, little r. When I fill in my Punnett square, this individual will be big R, so they're going to be red. This individual would be big R, little r, so they're also going to be red. This individual is also big R, little r, red. And then we got this freaky little white kid. Okay? So down here, a little bit different. So when we're talking our genotypic ratio, remember it goes from homozygous dominant. So we have one homozygous dominant kid, then heterozygous in the middle, right like in this order. And we have two heterozygous kids, and then homozygous recessive, of which I have one there. So my genotypic ratio would be 1 to 2 to 1. Now remember your phenotype or physical, this is what they're going to look like. So I start with the dominant trait. So in this case, I have 3 children that are going to be red, so 3, and 1 freaky little white flower. Okay, there we go. So this is what we did last time, and there are many traits that are complete dominance, but there's other ways that traits can be inherited besides complete dominance. And so that's what we're going to be comparing this one to. So let's look at this. Incomplete. When we have incomplete dominance, the dominant allele does not completely cover up the recessive one. And so instead, you get a blending. It is this blending that is key to this one. So what do I mean by that? I mean, if we have big R, and we're using the same thing, the same flowers, if it was incomplete, this individual would still be red. All right, and then if we had big R, little r, however, instead of being red, like in complete dominance, this is not completely covering up, incomplete. And so we get a blending of red and white. So in that case, my flower is going to come out pink. And that's what you see down here in the corner, okay? And then, of course, if you have two recessive alleles, you're going to show the recessive trait, so my flower would be white. My crosses are done the same way. Let's continue to cross two heterozygous individuals. So if we're heterozygous, though, now my parents are pink if it is incomplete dominance. So my parent would be big R, little r, in pink, and the other parent also big R, little r. We fill in our Punnett squares the same way, but this child will be red. This child will now be pink, and this is where making a key really comes in handy, so you don't make a silly mistake. All right, this child's going to be pink, and this child is going to be white. So this changes not how you do your Punnett square, but what they look like. And so in order to determine if it was incomplete, an incomplete cross, they would have to tell you that there were 3 colors, which would give you a hint that it's incomplete, or they'd have to just say, this is an incomplete cross, what would they look like? And you'd have to know that the heterozygous is now going to be a blending because it's incomplete. So you got to memorize that these two go together. My genotypic ratio is done the same way. That's not going to change because it's homozygous dominant, which is 1, to heterozygous, which is still 2, and then homozygous recessive, which is still 1. So that's exactly the same as it was in the previous slide with complete dominance. Only this is different. And so it looks different. And because it looks different, my phenotypic ratio is going to be different because this is what you look like. So now, how many of my kids are red? Well, just 1 of them. How many are pink? 2 of them. And how many are white? 1 of them. And so you'll notice something about these ratios when it is an incomplete dominance. The genotypic and the phenotypic are now always the same. So if you know 1, the other one's the same for incomplete, which actually makes it a little easier than complete dominance. All right, so that is when there's a blending. There's one other way, co-dominance. And when you have co, that means like cooperate, like they're doing something together. So co-dominance is they're both dominant, and so both traits show. So let's do an example here. In this case with big R, our flower is still going to be red. But if I have big R, little r, instead of a blending, they're going to show both traits. So in this case, if you look down here, that's my flower that has white and red splotches. It could be white and red checkers, white and red stripes. It does not matter. You're going to see both colors. So in this case, white and red. And then we're going to have our recessive guy who's still white. Once again, we're going to breed some heterozygous parents, and you'll notice they are no longer red or even pink if it's codominance. They're red and white. And again, in order for you to know it was codominance, they would have to tell you, and you'd have to know that codominance means you're seeing both traits. Or they would have to tell you the 3 colors, like they'd have to say the heterozygous is both red and white, and that would give you a clue that it's codominance. So when we fill in our Punnett square, it's still filled in exactly the same way, but this baby is red. This baby is red and white. This baby is red and white. And then we got the little white kid, okay? Genotypic ratio done the same exact way because it's not dependent on what they look like, so it's still 1 to 2 to 1. Now, phenotypic is dependent on what they look like, so again, we follow this pattern. How many of my babies are red? 1. How many of them are red and white is 2. And how many are white? So once again, these ratios will be the same, okay? So they're different than complete dominance. They're always going to be the same in both incomplete and codominance. So let's do a couple practice problems together. I have these watermelons. There's the traditional long watermelon and the little round watermelons that you see sometimes in the grocery store. So we're going to breed these two together, and it tells me up here that this is incomplete dominance, which means my middle guy is going to look a little different. So I know that big L is long, right? And I know that little l is round, but in between that, I have big L, little l. Nope, still hitting the wrong number. All right, big L, little l, which if you take long and round together, that makes oval, right? So these guys are what I'm going to be putting in here, but I'm going to breed a long one, which is big L, and you have a spot in your notes to do this, or you can draw in a spot. All right, and then we got little l, and then I'm going to fill in. So this parent is long, this parent is round, but my kids are going to be a blending between the two, which means they're oval, okay? So we did the cross, they are oval, and I'm asking what is the genotypic ratio? So that gets in the same order. How many homozygous dominant do I have? 0. How many heterozygous? Well, all 4, which means my homozygous recessive is also going to be 0. Now remember our trick from before, if it's anything but dominant, your phenotypic ratio is going to be the same because I have 3 ways to look. So there's going to be 3 numbers. So I have 0 long babies, 4 oval babies, and 0 round babies. So let's try a codominance. So remember, co showing both traits. Excuse me. So codominance in horses, we have these chestnut horses and white horses. Then they bred together, they make these roan ones. And roan horses, they look light tan or reddish from far away, but their individual hairs are either red or white. They're showing both traits. So we're going to breed together a homozygous dominant red horse, and we're going to breed it with a roan. So roan is the middle, you're showing both traits, right? And when I fill in my Punnett square the same way we've been filling in Punnett squares, and the same way you did it in middle school. Okay. So now I'm looking at what are my ratios. So my genotypic ratio, how many of my babies are homozygous dominant? 2 of them. How many are heterozygous? 2 of them. How many are homozygous recessive? 0. Okay? Now for my phenotypic ratio, let me get rid of this so this comes up a little for you. All right, my phenotypic ratio is what they're going to look like, which is different. How many of them are going to be dominant red? Well, 2 of them. How many are going to be roan, which is the mixture of both traits? 2 of them. And how many are going to be white? 0. And you'll notice that these are exactly the same. All right, so let me get this up here for you. I'm going to delete this for a minute, y'all. There we go. So remember that you're going to have 3 numbers, all right, because you have 3 ways to look. Otherwise, done the same. So with this, we have this thing called multiple alleles. There are some traits that have more than just 2 alleles, and blood typing is an example of a multiple allele cross, where you could have an A, a B, or an O in any combination of these guys. So that's what we're going to talk about now. Your blood types. So when you look at blood types as a multiple allele cross, this is what's happening. Type O blood is recessive. And type O blood happens to have what these things are called antigens. And antigens kind of, you know which ones belong to you and which ones don't. So your body knows this. And so in type O blood, you have no antigens at all. And this means that you can give your blood to anyone because your immune system will not recognize it as something foreign. So type O people are the universal donor, and it's recessive. Now, if you have type B blood, you have B antigens, which means you could get type O blood or type B blood, but you can't get these other 2 because if your immune system sees these antigens on there, it will attack them, which is no good if you're in a situation where you need blood. Type A has these antigens, so you can get type A or type O, but you cannot get these 2. And if you're type AB blood, you have both antigens, which means you can get blood from anybody because your body will always say, hey, those belong, that's okay. And so you are the universal recipient. So O is recessive to A and B are co-dominant. So it can show both traits if you have both alleles. All right, so here's just a little chart kind of showing you which ones are most common. And then down here is how we write these alleles. So to have type A blood, you could be homozygous A, and they put these on capital I's to show the difference between dominant, and then here's O that's recessive on the little i's. And because A and B are both dominant, they put them on the capital I's to show that. So this one is an A allele, and this one is a B, and this one has both, and they both show. So homozygous A, you have 2 A alleles that are both dominant. Hybrid A, or heterozygous, same thing, has 1 A allele and an O. Homozygous B is 2 capital B alleles. Hybrid or heterozygous has 1 big B allele and a little O allele. And if you're AB blood, you have 1 of each and they're codominant. And if you're O, you are totally recessive and you have neither. All right, and so we're going to run out of time here in a second, but I wanted to give you an example very quickly. So this is my blood type. I am type O, and my husband is type AB blood. So this is done like all your other crosses. The only difference is it's on I's. So the blood type here would be this with an A on it, and I can't make it go up high very easily, so it's going to stay down, and a lowercase I. So this individual would have type A blood. This one would be with a B on it,